Hey everyone, welcome back to InvestStream US India. Today's another Q&A session. So we had a question come in on Telegram recently, and the viewer wanted to know about equity stakes and distribution for first-time entrepreneurs. So let's start with founder equity distribution. In an ideal world, we would have 2 to 3 founders with equal equity for the equal contribution that they're making to the startup. However, we don't always see ideal situations, and in many instances, we see one founder with an outsized portion of equity for various reasons. Sometimes the reasons are like, they're the only one who's on board full time. Sometimes they're the ones who are footing the bills for all of the expenses of getting the startup up and running. Other times they are foregoing a stipend or salary until capital is raised while the others aren't. So there's a couple of different reasons why one founder might have more equity than another. Now, there's no hard and fast rule about how much equity one founder should have versus another. However, it should be somewhat equitable. One founder having 90% of the equity and another founder having 10% of the equity just means that the second founder isn't really a founder, they're just a highly paid executive. Now, this isn't the case for all investors, but I like to see a team that has similar stakes in the company because to me, that shows that each founder is just as important to the success of the company or close to it. Now, it's also important to distinguish the CEO from all of the other founders. The buck stops with the CEO, and it's important to investors to know who is in charge. A company where the CEO has 70 or 80% of the company and the second founder has 20 to 30% of the company isn't ideal, but it's acceptable, especially if some of the other cases that I mentioned before apply. Like they're paying all the expenses. Maybe they're even paying a salary out of their own pocket to one of the other founders. Personally, I'd like to see an even more split between the equity and the amount of risk that each of the founders is taking in getting the startup up and running. Now, moving on to ESOPs, or equity stock options. So, stock options for employees and key hires is important. It's critical to an early stage company, and that's where a lot of employees wind up making their money if the company is successful. So it's a good idea for founders to take probably about 10% and put it aside before they start raising their first round of financing. Now, this 10% dilution will be done before the round typically closes, so the dilution will come out of the founder's equity and not the investors. In subsequent rounds, investors may ask the founders to increase the option pool, and sometimes not. It depends on the stage of the company and the need for additional key hires to be brought in. Now, if there are no anti-dilution privileges for any of the investors, then previous investors will also be diluted in subsequent rounds. Some early stage investors ask for anti-dilution rights, but they usually go away after the Series A stage. As a founder, you probably want to avoid giving away any sort of anti-dilution privileges to any investor unless there is some sort of overwhelming reason to give them that. Like they're putting in a large chunk of change, they are diluting you very little, they're leading the round and bringing in some other really helpful investors. So there could be some reasons why you want to do that, but try to stay away from it. Now, when doing waterfall calculations, ideally have an attorney do this for you. Don't forget to take into account any convertible notes or warrants or other instruments you may have issued. Try to dilute no more than, I would say 15 to 20%, not including the option pool, by the time you close your seed round. You may have to dilute another 15 to 20% in a post-seed round if you decide that you really need to raise that post-seed and you can't get straight to your Series A. But in your Series A, you'll likely dilute somewhere between 20 and 30%, depending on the vertical you're in, the country you're in, and what the market conditions are at that particular type. So if the founders collectively retain more than 50% of the company after the Series A, that's fantastic. I hope that's helpful. If you have additional questions, feel free to send them in. We'd love to hear them, and I'll do my best to answer them at least once a week. If you found the video and the answers that I've given helpful and useful, please hit the like button. That'd help me a lot. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. If you've got a question, feel free to drop us an email at investstream@blockhack.io or tweet me on Twitter, or feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of InvestStream.